everybody, and welcome to the Tapestry of Connection. I am your host, Gena Frances, and today I have the lovely and talented Susan De Silva from Sensing Spirit with Susan De Silva. She is an amazing medium, a kind and wonderful person, a talented artist, and so I'm so honored to bring her to all of you so that you could get to know her as well. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you, Gena. Thank you for that lovely welcome. I'm delighted to be here.
I wanted to start with asking you, what led you to discover this path?
I think I can go back a very long way as I'm a little bit older. But I didn't realize it was mediumship when I first started having very intuitive and what I now know were psychic experiences. And I was very aware of an inner world, which I kept very private. It felt very sacred to me, and often received guidance or messages and occasionally passed it on to other people, and they were quite shocked. So I soon learned to keep it all to myself. But in my 20s, following some personal crisis, I ended up at the College of Psychic Studies in London, where I met a medium called Ivy Northage, and she told me that when my children were grown up to come back and she would train me as a medium. Well, through one thing or another, it took 50 years for my children to grow up for all sorts of reasons. And then I decided I was finally go and find out what mediumship was all about, and started attending courses and met you and lots of other lovely friends.
So take me back to your 20s when you would have these connections. Like, was it something that you sort of always knew, or was it like, that's strange. I don't know why I felt that or knew that.
Yeah, I would often just have like what I would call an inner dream or a visualization, and something would just unfold and it would occur a few weeks later. I knew when my father was going to pass. I knew when he passed, I could hear him shouting, "I'm still here." It still didn't occur to me that I was a medium. I just thought, well, that's very interesting. I was very accepting of the experiences. And then I began to keep a dream journal for 2 years, and that opened up another level of understanding, which made me look at the visual language of symbolism. So then I explored Carl Jung and began to understand that the visual language is an incredibly rich language and a good way to understand some of the things you see as a medium, because obviously you work with clairvoyance and often can see pictures, but they're not always literal. You have to be able to understand what they mean on a symbolic level.
So you've been teaching yourself for quite some time before you formally were training.
Yes, very much so. I began a sort of deep dive. I did a basic astrology course, and I have followed that ever since. And I explored mythology because that sits very well with astrology. Way back, I did transcendental meditation. It was in a library, and I found myself flying around the ceiling and not even really questioning what was going on. It wasn't till my 70s when I embarked on mediumship training proper, it all clicked into place, that all this private inner life that I had was something that we could all have if we just listen to our inner world.
This is something that you can come to at any point in life.
Yes.
It's lifelong learning. So it's not something that you have to start very early on. You have plenty of time. It's just when it calls you, it calls you.
Definitely, definitely. And I also made a decision in my 20s that I was going to work with my heart and my hands. And as you explore the mediumship path, you often open up a more spiritual pathway as well. And service becomes a very important issue. And as a medium, you serve, and you obviously want to work with a healing energy through the messages that you bring through. But I decided I ended up serving through care, really, and working in all sorts of areas: elderly care, mental health, childcare, people with physical disabilities, and finally with palliative care, where I was able to sort of start to use some of my skills in a way because of the understanding of what was happening with people in a very compassionate way. I was still bounded by the necessity to sort of just offer the service that I was employed for, but my awareness grew of what was really happening for people.
And so I'm sure in that type of work, were you with people when they passed? Did you?
No. I offered, first of all, a centre where people could come to be supported and do different activities, and we did day trips and just supported them because of the isolation they often felt, and dealing with a palliative care diagnosis is quite tough. And then I went on to head up a complementary therapy service where we delivered the therapies to patients on the wards, having chemotherapy or radiotherapy in the clinics. And that's when I I trained and I ran relaxation and stress management sessions, which involved guided visualization.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was also very heartwarming to see people opening up to the realization of the inner world, which was very sustaining at that time of their life.
See, I'm learning things about you, Susan. I knew you were in care and I knew how warm your heart was and how empathetic you are, but I didn't realize that takes a really special kind of person.
Oh, you're very kind. It's a great privilege, actually, to just stand with somebody sometimes, to sort of walk a little way with on their path. It's their path, it's not mine. But just to be there sometimes and be of some sort of assistance is very heartwarming, actually.
With mediumship, you do talk about service. It's the best way to get your ego out of the way. It's the
Yes.
best way to connect spiritually. So why don't you share a little bit about what it is about mediumship that is so service oriented? Because I think a lot of people, they do this when they hear mediumship. You're talking to dead people, or but really there is great healing and there is great service in that space. So
Yeah.
can you share a little bit about your experience with that?
Yes, sure. Well, when giving a reading, we never know who's going to come through, but I always ask that somebody comes through that loves the person I'm giving a reading for and has a message for them. And often there's a great deal of emotion tied up with that, which I can feel coming from the spirit communicator, but I can then see in the sitter's face. And I think that emotional release is very healing. And we all need to know that we're loved, and we don't hear it enough. And hearing it from someone that we loved that has passed is a beautiful thing. It's beautiful to hear that.
So your first sort of like official mediumship experience, do you remember what that was like?
Yes. I did a course actually at the College of Psychic Studies because when I suddenly was free of needing to look after anybody, I thought, oh, I'll look after me now. And I found this course, and it was about finding your own spirit guides. But we were given an exercise to do a reading for somebody. It was the first official reading I'd ever done. And I found myself talking about friends and giving names, and it just flowed. And then afterwards, when the person came back and said they knew all the names and they could recognize it all, I was completely blown away because I wasn't expecting that result. So I'll never forget it. It was very natural. And then later on, I also did another one in a group that we both are aware of, and brought through a very emotional message, which also left me feeling a little bit humbled and a little bit shaken up. I will go on to say, though, that when you know you're really connected to spirit, you often do feel a sense of tingling or the energy. It validates that you know you're connected. So then when the emotions come out, they seem to come out in a much stronger way.
Yeah, for me, when I feel connected, there's a shift in the air in the room.
Yes.
Like I can feel the air changes, and other people might not notice, but I notice. It's like there's a different vibration or a different sort of heaviness or lightness to the air that lets me know spirit has moved in. It's a funny thing, but it's like, oh, I know, okay, they're here.
Yes, I agree. It's like something's gone denser. And then I don't know if you get the sensation of somebody might be standing very close to you. Yeah, it's
Usually
beautiful.
for me, they're usually either in front of me or to the side of me.
Okay.
The time they're not in the back. I know different people, like some people say, oh, if it's on the mother's side, it's on one side, it's the father. I haven't gotten that equipped yet. Now they're just usually either in front or to the side of me. But it still fascinates me. I don't know if it will ever stop fascinating me.
No,
That
I think it's an endless journey, to be honest. Yes, I'm aware of that. People sort of have certain people coming in different areas and they allocate their family or friend position. But that happened to me in the beginning, but now it doesn't. It seems to just arrive.
Mhm.
You know, your mediumship changes. And I think a lot of people start with clairvoyance. That's a very common way to start. And it's beautiful because you just see all these pictures. But it can
Mhm.
change. And sometimes then you start sensing, you know, or you just know and you don't know how you know. And obviously clairaudience comes in as well. And I think as a developing medium, it's good to practice all the clairs, you know, set an intention that you're going to work with different clairs and see what happens.
Yeah, and for me, I think clairvoyance was the last one that came in for
Oh,
me.
yeah,
Clairaudience and clairsentience were probably the first. Like, if I ask the spirit, "Can you show me how you passed?" And usually I'll feel it in my body, like I'll feel
okay, yes,
how they passed.
yes,
Later
yeah,
on, I started to get images, but like, one of my teachers taught me, okay, as soon as you feel it, you can ask them to take it away. You don't have to hold on to it because it
yeah,
can
it
get
can be quite
uncomfortable.
uncomfortable, can't it?
Yeah.
Definitely, yes. It's interesting when you're talking about how a reading starts, because it can
Mhm.
start in all sorts of ways. You know, you can become aware of a person, or you can
Mhm.
become aware of a symptom, you know, or
Mhm.
you just hear something, or you see a scene. It seems to change quite a bit.
For me, one of the most humbling things is just the fact that they're trusting you, the fact
Yeah,
that they're coming in and trusting you with their message. That I mean, one, the fact that it confirms that there's something else beyond this world is incredible to me and has deepened my faith. But then
yeah,
just the fact that like that awesome responsibility that you have, that they've allowed you into their world to be able to be that conduit to their loved one. I mean, I get chills even now thinking about that. I mean, how does that present for you?
I think it's a great honor.
Mhm.
I think it's an honor, and I think, you know, it's important to be grateful. I'm very grateful. You know, I asked many times, could I serve? You know, and I made a commitment that I would do that, and to the best of my ability. And sometimes my ability seems to work better than other times. But no, it's a great honor to be able to sort of be receptive and be able to pass on, you know, what spirit brings and wants to say, but never forgetting who's in charge.
Even though I was raised with a deep faith, I find that this work has deepened my faith to another level.
Yes, definitely, definitely. And what I realize very much is accepting where everybody is on their path, and
Mhm.
everybody's vibration is different as well, and everybody's awareness is different. You can't help but feel compassionate when you see sometimes people, how can I put it, a little bit stuck, you know. But the mediumship path has actually opened up my spiritual path much more than I ever realized. And in some ways, that's becoming much more important,
Mhm.
much more important.
And you're an amazing teacher too, I'll say. I
Oh,
mean, and now that I know your background, all the things that you've served and done, and your patience, your willingness to meet people where they are. I mean, that's a gift, Susan. And I know that you're looking into possibly teaching as well.
yes, yes. Well, I'm now running a circle, which took a while to organize. And that's been going for about 6 months now, I'm really pleased to say. And I'm also planning some art workshops, intuitive art, just to explore, because for some people, not everybody, but for some people, it's a lovely process to blend, you know, some artistic ability with mediumship. So I'm
Mhm.
looking forward to doing that.
Your art is really inspired and it's beautiful. It's breathing with life and just it makes me happy to see your painting. Have you always been an artist?
Well, my grandmother drummed into me when I was a small child that I was an artist. And
Mhm.
I spent many of a childhood, you know, at the table with the paints and the colours. And everything I did, I had to draw. So, and then I would draw maps and all sorts of things. You know, it, it was a natural, I think, ability, and I didn't really pick it up so strongly until I retired. So it's been lovely to do that later in life as well.
I never thought I would do mediumship. I thought that was like, didn't want to do it, didn't want to touch it, didn't want to have anything to do with it, because I'm like, that's over there. You can have that. I'll just deal with the tarot reading, thank you very much, and the energy healing. But I find that it's all interconnected, and
Definitely.
it all comes together beautifully. Like whatever the person needs, the person that finds you and what they need, spirit delivers. And
Yes, definitely. And it's our everyday ego that panics and runs away. I have been in that place many times, Gena, so I do empathize. But you have to remember what your spirit has and your soul wants you to do. And eventually you have to listen to that. And it does make you brave.
yeah.
You sort of think, well, I'll just try because I've been asked or told, let's try. And then people say yes, and things happen. So you have to just go with that. And the ego side of us, we need that, and we can't escape that, but we have to be braver.
It's daunting, right? And I would say to people who are wanting to learn, it's always good to have many teachers so you can see many different ways of how people do things, because it's an individual thing and it's a collective thing, but how one teacher works for you might not work for someone else.
I totally agree with that. And some teachers will be very evidential based, which is very important. If you want to be a platform medium, you really need to have that covered, shall we say, and work on that. And other people will have a more spiritual leaning, and that can be incredibly nurturing, very nurturing.
It's very regulated in the UK, right? I mean, mediumship is
Yes.
really
Well,
regulated.
there's the association, the SNU, the Spiritualist National Association, and they are quite prescriptive. They abide by the 7 principles of mediumship. And it's been going for a long time, and it's a very solid, reliable organization. But there's also an increasing feeling from some mediums they want to work in a slightly freer way.
So some of the ways that when you're with a sitter, right, or a client, there are things you want to do to help the person in front of you recognize that you really are bringing their loved one through. So what are some of the ways that you can do that?
Yeah, well, obviously evidence, if you can describe the person, what sort of life they had, their personality, maybe their appearance, their relationship to you, anything about their hobbies or their interests or their pets. Often the smallest thing will make somebody recognizable, so that's the aim. The person you are reading for, the sitter, as we say here, will recognize something about the person you're bringing through.
And then there's usually like a memory, a message that you want to.
Yes, definitely. That's where I tend to go. I normally start with the personality, and then I will talk about the memories, and then a message will come from that.
And you say it can be the smallest thing. Like sometimes you question yourself, right? And this is what I've learned is like to go ahead and not, like, the linear mind wants to get in there and say, well, that's silly.
Yeah.
You're probably just imagining that. That's not, and the longer you do this, the more you can push that to the side. But I remember one particular time I was reading for someone and the person just kept showing me a watch, just kept showing me a watch. And finally I was like, they just keep showing me a watch. And I didn't think that was a big deal, like it's a man, it's a watch. And the person on the other end said, oh, my father had this very special watch that he always had, and we buried him with his watch because it was that important to him. And so it was like, it meant something to her. And see, I was trying to filter it through like, oh, that's nothing that great that I'm bringing through, so that's not going to resonate. That's my ego getting in the way of the message. That's, spirit was very obviously trying to communicate, because that person in front of me, the sitter, the client, would know, and then that would connect them to their person that's passed on. So have you had experiences like that?
Yeah, definitely. And it's easy to dismiss something, but it won't go away. You have to come back and say it. And Yeah, that happens many times. And another thing I'd like to share is sometimes I hear a song and I was reading for somebody and I could hear the song, I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay. And I thought, I can't say that. So I thought about how I could say it. And yes, he was a lumberjack and his father was a lumberjack. So sometimes there can be really quite a sense of humor from spirit giving you messages. So I've even had messages where I've gone back and said, I can't possibly say that. And I said to my sitter, this might seem a bit hard. I'm getting a bit of a hard message. And she encouraged me. She said, oh, go on, go on. And I said, messages that all your friends are boring. I didn't want to say it. And she said, yes, they are. So, you know, sometimes you just have to say what you're given. And that's very hard when you're learning mediumship, because if somebody shows you, say, a fish, you might suddenly start talking about fishing. And it could be completely different. If you just said a fish, it might be a fish brooch or a fish picture. You know, so we have to be careful that we don't do an association. We have to let the sitter do that.
The association. And that's something also one of my teachers taught me. He said, you know, you're going to have to say it out loud, because sometimes when you say it out loud, you will be able to tell by the way it comes out of your mouth that you're off, or that you need to, you know, refine it a bit. But if you don't, you know, you run the risk of alienating the connection that you're making. And that fear that we have of getting it wrong, as all humans do, you know, sometimes we'll intercede in the beginning when we're learning, right? And try to stop us from saying it, because we know that it's not quite right. And so one of the greatest tips he told me is like, just say it. Say, I know this isn't quite right, but I'm getting a sense of such and such. And then as soon as you say it, then it can be refined.
Yeah, that's a very good tip. And what you learn is, don't be afraid of a no. It's just that you may have just picked up something, you're slightly off yourself. And every medium does that, however experienced they are. Everybody does that sometimes. I've watched many mediums at the Arthur Findlay College, you know, giving demonstrations, and even the most advanced mediums that are teaching all of us still sometimes have that situation. So it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just something to work through. And it's good to pass things on, because otherwise it seems to stop the flow. And you want to have a nice flow. You want to say something. You want the next thing to come. But if you're trying to hold it back, it's not helpful.
And then sometimes you will, you know, I noticed this happens, you will be correct in what you're delivering. And the sitter or the client will say, no, 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 no. You know, and you'll be like, I know that that's right. Like, I know that I'm not making this up. And inevitably, I find that either the sitter may come back later and say, oh, you know, and that actually happened with me and you. We were doing a reading, and you got something about a loved one of mine, and, you know, pain on whatever side. It actually happened to be someone living. And later that day, I called that person, and they said to me, oh, I have all this pain on this side, and da, 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 da. And I remember writing and being like, Susan, I'm so sorry. Like, you know, you were right. Correct. I just didn't know it yet.
It happens. It's amazing. The other thing is, when you give readings, you don't always remember them, because I think you're in a slightly altered state, obviously, and you're just passing on the messages, and maybe a couple of things will stay, but a lot of times you don't remember them. But it's not for the medium, is it? It's for the client or the sitter. Yeah,
especially if I'm doing tarot readings and I'm in the flow. I hope people record them, because I don't often remember what I'm saying. It's just coming out. And then I might get a call, you know, I'm sure you do too, later. Oh, you told me such and such. And I'd be like, did I? Did I? Essentially, what I've learned is we're moving out of the way, and we're becoming a clear channel for the information. And so even though we're physically there and it's coming from us, it's coming from another place.
Definitely.
What would you want someone to know that's just starting to wake up, or maybe toying with the idea of like, is this for me? what should I do? How should I approach this?
Well, I always talk to people about their intuition first. And because everybody understands what intuition is, that inner learning, it's inner tuition. And to start from there, how many times have you been right with your intuition? And then I also talk to them about when they have a daydream or they're daydreaming or imagining something. So linking intuition and the imagination. Because when you start to imagine and have a daydream, and everybody can relate to that, there comes a time when the daydream can almost take over. And it's a sense of, I'm not really daydreaming this, I'm watching it happen, or I'm listening to it happen. And that's the beginning of opening up your psychic abilities. And just be gentle with yourself. Start with your imagination. In England, we can go to circles. In the spiritualist churches, we can go to circles. But I know that there are other organizations around the world where you can gather and practice. And that's a very good thing to do. And you'll be amazed sometimes how you get things right. And sometimes you'll be a bit fed up because you didn't. But that's all part of the process. And people often say, how do I know if it's my imagination or if it's really happening? Well, the imagination is the door to it really happening. So I think just allow that to happen. And one medium in a circle I was at told everybody just to make everything up. And those readings were accurate. So it's worth playing with. It's like any skill or any muscle. It needs time. Just give yourself time. And to be honest, once you are waking up to this, usually you don't let go because it calls you back. And you may leave it for a while, but it will come back.
There are a lot more people, it feels like. I don't know if it's because we're all connected, one world, the internet. I don't know what it is, but there seems to be a greater understanding that we all have.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going through what is called the Great Awakening. That's what it is to me. And it's for the last 3 years. And I think sometimes as well, with so many world events that are shaking us all up, I think part of that is all to get us to wake up and understand that, we're a spiritual being living in a human body on earth. And there's a lot more to us. And I think we're all meant to wake up to find that out for ourselves inwardly and open the doors to our own spiritual path.
And what do you say to people who are like, oh, this is a bunch of BS, it's not real, you're trying to fool people, you're crazy. There's a whole litany of things that people who want to discount this work.
Well, the first thing I would assume they're not ready to hear. And if we look at our lives on earth and reincarnation, which is real for me, we've all been there. We must have had lifetimes when we weren't interested. We thought it was all rubbish. But somehow in this lifetime, we've woken up to the fact that it's a very true and inner divine path that we need to follow. And people are frightened as well. I think sometimes it's the ego part of us saying, no, it's not real, because they feel out of control. Because really, the ego is control of our physical body and our little life down here. But the spirit and soul is in control of us. And the ego doesn't want to give up that control. So it's going to ridicule what it doesn't understand and what it's frightened of. So I think the only thing we can do is be quite kind and compassionate. Maybe drop the odd, I don't know, words of wisdom if they come to us, or perhaps one day you might think differently. And in their own time, they'll come to it.
I've stopped trying to convince people. It's a useless exercise to try to convince anyone who doesn't want to, have anything to do with this. That's their journey, and that's what I've learned.
It's like we're all guided. We have our guides. When time is ready, we'll know. And their life must be about other things that are very important for their spiritual development in this life. And it's not for us to sort of try and change that. Well, we can't change it anyway, but it's respecting where we all are on the path.
Do you do sitting in the power? And if so, we explain to people sort of what that is and what that entails.
Yeah. When I first came to the mediumship, yes, I was sitting in the power, and that involves grounding and earthing, and then opening the chakras in the astral spine, and then setting a creative visualization or imagery to leave your body and go to a special place, a chamber or whatever place you create, to talk with your guides. And for me, that was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful phase. And it went on a very long time. And then it changed. And now I tend to do a very different form of meditation, where I'm looking much more to merge with the divine energies, shall we say. It's much deeper. So if I'm going to do a reading, I might do that and ask if there's anything I can pass on. And sometimes I get told certain things. Sometimes I'm taken to the Akashic records, and some messages may come in that I can share. So everything changes. The mediumship changes as you develop. I think when you first start, you're thrilled to be this messenger, this conduit. And then later on, you become merged with a sense of we're all one in spirit. And it's a beautiful change.
That is. There have been times when I've been in meditation and you just overcome with this feeling of complete and utter divine love that is indescribable, really.
It's an incredible force. People don't realize how much energy is tied up with love and wisdom. It's a very strong force on our planet. It's what Jesus Christ manifested and was talking about. And I think also you begin to sort of learn about the masters, the spiritual masters, and then I think you're opening a door that will never shut.
And so let's say they're looking for someone to give them a reading or to connect with. What are some of the ways that you can identify an ethical practitioner?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's very much what they intuitively feel comfortable with. If they are interested but scared, I would just encourage them to go slowly. When you really learn what's going on, it's that the fear goes. And often people come in like that and it turns out they've got amazing sort of abilities, but they didn't know. So I would say in some ways it's a pressured journey, but that comes from your own spirit, your own soul pushing you on. You don't want anyone else to do that. And just being with like-minded people, actually, and just relaxing into that environment, I think that's important because it gives you the courage to perhaps try something and surprise yourself.
One of the things people ask me, if the spirits are all around, why is it that some people can connect to them and other people can't?
Well, I think we are all meant to be here, living on Earth, having a human life. That's what we've elected to come here for. And you can't escape your everyday life experiences, the lessons you're learning through your everyday life experiences. That's why we're here. And there are times when we can all become much more aware of spirit or other beings around us. And there are times when it's completely shut down. So it's not something that you can have open all the time. Well, some people do, but the majority of us don't. We have to sort of prepare and open up our awareness to do that. So I think it's not a case of being upset that it's not happening all the time. That's probably a good thing because, otherwise we need to experience life on Earth. That's why we're here.
Right. And you don't need to, like with anything, it can be a form of escapism if used incorrectly, right? So, I think that's the thing is like we are, as you're saying, this is an experience that we're having on Earth. If we were meant to be totally there, we wouldn't be here, right?
Precisely, yeah. And you can get very spaced out and, like with deep meditations or readings or, and then it's quite a good thing to go and do something like mundane, like housework afterwards. It's very grounding. And one of the masters, Sri Yukteswar, would teach Yogananda. They would talk about the spiritual world. They'd have amazing experiences. And then he would say, come on, let's go and sweep the courtyard with a broom. And I've always remembered that. And in my life, whenever I've had a crisis or a major stress, the house gets cleaned.
Mhm.
And that's very grounding, and it seems to sort of dissipate a lot of anxiety or tension. But it's also very good to help you ground if you're feeling spaced out.
And I find too, I mean, I know it sounds silly, but going outside, if you're where you can, and
Yeah.
taking your shoes off and putting your feet into the earth,
Yeah.
there's something about that that's quite grounding,
Yes.
or salt baths or things that
Yeah.
kind of bring elements of the earth to you. For people who don't know what grounding is, can you just give them a little tip
Yeah.
on grounding exercise?
Well, in terms of a mediumship grounding exercise, we would visualize roots. You would sit and breathe quietly first, actually, just slow everything down. And then visualize roots coming from your feet down into the earth, and really visualize it. Visualize them going through the soil, through the rocks. You can visualize them going right down to the center and then bringing that energy back up into your feet. And I often do a walking meditation in a local sort of little area near me. It's a church garden full of trees and plants. It's a beautiful area. And I walk round, imagine that I'm connected through my feet to the roots of the trees. And that's very grounding and very refreshing. So it's, again, connection with nature, connection with Mother Earth.
And for people who are afraid of darker energy or afraid of ghosts, what can you say to those people who have that fear of the dark side of things, the things that,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah. Well, first of all, often when things appear as a dark shape or a dark something, sometimes it's just a lack of consciousness and awareness. It's almost like you're trying to look into the dark to see what it is, and they appear as a dark, shadowy shape. I think the thing is to always set the intention that you will work in light and love. That's very important. I think the second thing is to ask your spirit guides to support you and protect you, and then forget about it, because I think this is my experience. I know not everybody thinks the same, but I don't endlessly ask for protection. I just have asked, and I know that I am protected, and I work within light and love. So I think when shadowy things appear, and they've happened to me, I just watch them. I watch and see what's going on. And sometimes it leads to something incredible. And sometimes I've said, no, go away, and I will ask them to leave.
Mhm.
So I'll give you another little example with one of my grandchildren who kept seeing witches. And I said, they're not here in the earth plane, they're not here. So tell them to go away. And she did that a few times and was no longer seeing witches. So, and I think that's quite common that people, well, children especially, can do that. And just to be not understanding that they can say, go away. And then moving on, her younger sister was once jumping up and down on the trampoline, screaming out, I want to see a real unicorn, as you do when you're little. And the older granddaughter said to her, you can only see that in a different world. You can't see it on Earth. You'll have to just see it in your imagination.
Oh, bless them.
So I thought that's a very simple way to explain it, really.
Yeah. And I'm doing a reading. I'll say, please help me to bring in the greatest light. And it may my message be for the greatest and highest good of this person and the greatest and highest good of all concerned. And I feel like that just kind of can push away if there is negative stuff out there. And then I feel like, it's all good, right?
I think that's beautiful, Gina. I think that's a very good idea. I think, for anybody isn't sure, I think that follow that advice. It's very good advice. And yeah, don't concentrate on the negative. We all know if we do that, we get low, and depressed. So despite everything going on, always look for the positive and the light and the love. And there are lessons to be learned in every situation we go through in life. And now that I'm a little bit older, I can look back and see them much more clearly. You don't always see it at the time. And then later on the penny drops and you say, oh, that's why I was experiencing that. I won't do that again.
Brings me to when you were mentioning Akashic records, like, some people will say, well, you all say we have free will, but everything's written in the Akashic records. What have you learned from looking in the
Well,
Akashic records?
yeah, I just asked my spirit guides, can I see the Akashic records? And was taken there. And I sort of, it's more a sensing of seeing something like I just see like a book, but there's nothing written on the pages. And I just get a sense of any message that I may need to give that person. So I'm not looking to delve into personal history or information or anything about their life other than what is the message. So that's how it's worked for me. But I know other people work with it in a very different way. So I think I'm just on touching the periphery just to get the message.
But for people who would say, well, if everything's written, then what's my free will? Do you have any thoughts on?
Well, the free will comes from the spirit, not from the ego on earth.
Yeah.
So that's where the free will comes from. I mean, we try to endorse that, but sometimes it doesn't matter what we want to do, it just won't happen. And another time, if you're listening inwardly and you listen to what sort of your spirit self or higher self is telling you, it will just happen smoothly. So that's where the free will lies.
Well, and I also sort of look at it like it's like a slinky, right? Life is kind of time expands and contracts, and that we all sort of have an agreement before we come here of the lessons that we want to learn in some way, the feelings and the experiences we want to grow our soul with. And so for me, I look at it as like the free will is maybe how we get there to that experience, but we're going to have that learning experience, and it's going to keep coming either until we learn it in this lifetime or the next lifetime, or and so that's kind of how I sort of look at it, is that I've signed up to learn maybe compassion or empathy or different things that I've signed up to learn, or maybe one lifetime I've signed up to learn hardship or spiritual development or whatever, and then there will be opportunities along the way that present themselves, and I can go down this road or I could go down this road. And maybe if I go to the right, it's going to take me a little longer to get to that lesson. If I go to the left, I'll get there a little bit quicker. And that's sort of how I look at the free will scenario. But it does sort of run around in my head still sometimes.
I think one thing I found really useful was if I was going through a crisis or a really tough time, I would ask for the enlightenment, and I would say, I need to understand this. I need to understand because I don't want to go through this again in another life. So it was almost like, bring it on, because let's really deal with it now. And, I've had some very tough challenges in my life. But when I got some understanding, as soon as I got some understanding or insight, the pain would ease. It's as if the wisdom, once you understand, you don't feel it quite the same way. So
yeah, I mean, I think I've experienced, and I think that's common in a lot of us that come to this work, is there have been real pain points and challenges in our life.
Yeah. I think we stop looking for the solution on earth, and we know it must be something much more important is going on.
Yeah. And then you realize, like, through that experience, as awful as it was, as hard as it was, when you look back on it, it shaped everything else that came after. Like you stop regretting and realizing that it was meant.
You can even, you feel grateful for it, and you would never have thought that when you were in it. And it's a bit like finding the jewels, the treasure hidden it's often hidden in the dirt, isn't it? It's like you go through all of that, and then suddenly there's a diamond in your hand, and you realize, oh, that's what it was about.
On that end, collectively on the planet, there does seem to be a lot of darkness and a lot of heaviness at this time in our life around the globe. And so What would you say to people who are struggling, who can't make sense of it, who need some sort of clarity on why? What would be some of your wisdom that you would share, knowing what you know now, to maybe help these people
I
along the
think
way?
I'd go back to what I said earlier about understanding where everybody is on their own individual journey, and that certain things are definitely happening to wake everybody up. I think if we talk about karma, in some ways it's down, like other people's karma is up to them. It's like, I think it's greater than our understanding. Shall we put it like that? I feel that a lot of things are happening that are actually destroying old structures. And that's very threatening for people, especially the ego, who like things to stay the same. But ultimately, it will all be for the good. However, the caveat is you come to Earth to experience things. And I think you come to experience everything through your lifetimes. And if you think about the millions of people on the planet, all with their different spiritual paths, their different lives, all the experiences you could have on the planet, from sort of, I don't know, theatre to entertainment to war to service to health. There's just so incredible amount of experiences to be had. And I think sometimes it's helpful to view it as if we're all living in a play, and we experience different roles while we're here. And there's roles within the roles, like sometimes you look back on your life and you see it was like you had about 6 or 7 different roles. You didn't realize it. You're the actors in this play. And then you find the inner role, and that puts everything into a different perspective.
And I think that may be why It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart is my favorite
Very
film of
good.
all
Yeah.
time. For those of you who haven't seen it, I would encourage you at some point to watch it. Old black and white film. But he experiences life what it would have been like if he had not been born, and all the lives that he touched, and all the seemingly little things that he did that he wasn't even aware of that
Yeah.
made a difference in someone else's life. And it's like, it really is a humbling experience to watch that film, to
Yeah.
realize this man that, I'm sure it's fiction, but it's a brilliant piece of fiction where, he thought his life was small. He thought he didn't achieve all the things that he wanted to achieve in life because he didn't get to travel and he didn't get to do all of the things that he had thought of as a young person. But
Yeah.
then when he got to see all the ways that, he had touched all these different lives, and his brother comes in and says, to my brother George, the richest man in town, like I cry every single time I see that,
Oh, yeah.
because the richness is not about the money or the things it's
Yeah.
about the experience and the love and the
Yeah.
compassion and the lives that we touch. And
Yeah.
so I just think that you have touched so many lives through all the different things that you've done, Susan, and all the care that you've given people and all the beauty and wisdom that you've given and still continue to give. And I just am really honored to know you and to know, to get to experience a little bit of your wisdom. I know I've grown tremendously from being around you and just the nurturing and the care that you give. And so I just wanted to say thank you for just being the wonderful you that you are,
You're
and for.
very kind, Gena. And thank you for being the wonderful you that you are, too.
And so for those of you that really would like to get to know Susan better, and I highly recommend it because she is a talented artist, an amazing medium, a kind and compassionate teacher, you can find her on Facebook at Sensing Spirit with Susan De Silva. Just check her out. And Susan, I just want to say thank you again. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you, Gena. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us. And if you can, drop a like, follow, or share this podcast. If you need to get in touch with me, you can do so at spirituallightwisdom.com. Remember, we're all connected, and these are just some of the stories that weave us together. For the Tapestry of Connection, I'm Gena Frances. Until next time.